When my son took my pension and said, "This is your rent," leaving me with only $17, I was stunned by the betrayal of my own flesh and blood. Instead of support, I received cold calculation. Instead of gratitude, I received humiliation. But everything changed 3 months later when he was forced to pay me. You won't believe what I did. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. Michael's fist slammed against the dinner table with such force that Emma's milk glass toppled over, sending white liquid cascading across the wood surface. The twins froze mid-bite, their chicken nuggets forgotten as they stared wide-eyed at their father's reddened face. "Dad, you can't do this. We need your money." My son's voice cracked with desperation, his carefully groomed appearance suddenly disheveled as he leaned forward aggressively. I straightened in my chair, meeting his furious gaze with the calm I'd practiced for weeks. The decision wasn't sudden. I'd been planning this moment since Christmas, when I'd watched Michael count my pension contributions like a hungry wolf eyeing prey. 40 years of hard work is enough. I've earned my rest. The words hung in the kitchen air, mixing with the scent of Sarah's meatloaf and the growing tension that made everyone's shoulders rigid. Through the frost-covered window, Detroit's February wind rattled the glass, but inside our house felt even colder. Sarah's fork trembled as she set it down carefully, her nervous laugh failing to cut through the atmosphere. "Maybe we should discuss this after dinner. The children—" "No!" Michael's chair scraped violently against the linoleum as he stood, towering over our small dining table. "Dad, listen to me carefully. The mortgage payment is due next week. Emma needs dental work. Ethan's soccer registration costs $300. You think your Social Security will cover all that?" I watched my granddaughter's lower lip quiver as her father's voice rose. These innocent children shouldn't witness this breakdown, but Michael seemed beyond caring about their comfort. His financial desperation had consumed whatever paternal instincts he once possessed. "Son, you have no right to tell me what to do." The simple statement hit him like a physical blow. His face cycled through emotions, shock, rage, then calculating coldness that reminded me uncomfortably of his mother during her worst moments. "Right?" He laughed bitterly, spreading his arms wide in theatrical disbelief. "I have every right. This is my house now, remember? You signed it over 2 years ago for tax purposes. If you stop working, you'll pay rent to live here." The kitchen seemed to shrink around us. Emma started crying softly, while Ethan grabbed her hand under the table. Sarah's face had gone pale, her loyalty clearly torn between defending her husband and protecting her father-in-law, who'd welcomed her into this family with open arms. "Michael, please," she whispered, but her protest carried no real conviction. I pushed back from the table slowly, my joints protesting after another long day at the plant. 65 years of living had taught me when battles could be won and when strategic retreat was necessary. Tonight belonged to the latter category. I'll be filing my retirement papers tomorrow. Without another word, I walked past my son's stunned expression and grabbed my winter coat from the hallway closet. The front door's slam echoed through the house as I stepped into Detroit's bitter February evening, my breath forming white clouds as I began walking down Oak Street. Behind me, I could hear Michael's muffled shouting resume, but distance muffled his words into angry noise. The streetlights cast long shadows across the snow-covered sidewalk as I walked without destination, my mind already turning toward tomorrow's necessary steps. Dawn broke gray and cold over Detroit as I woke in my small bedroom, Michael's threats from the previous evening still echoing in my memory. The house remained silent, my son and his family avoiding the kitchen where our confrontation had unfolded. I dressed quietly, pulling on my warmest sweater and gathering the manila folder I'd prepared weeks ago. The McNamara Federal Building downtown housed the Social Security office, and I'd researched the bus route carefully. The DDOT bus arrived precisely at 8:15, its diesel engine rumbling as other early commuters climbed aboard. An elderly woman with a walking cane smiled at me as I took the seat across from her. "Cold morning," she observed, adjusting her colorful scarf. "Spring will come eventually." My response felt prophetic somehow, as if I was speaking about more than just weather. Detroit's urban landscape rolled past the grimy bus windows, abandoned lots mixed with signs of slow renewal, young families walking children to school, workers hurrying toward office buildings. This city had survived bankruptcy and reinvention. Perhaps I could manage the same transformation. The federal building's security checkpoint required removing my belt and shoes, a process that made me feel simultaneously important and vulnerable. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed over rows of plastic chairs, where other seniors waited with their own manila folders and hopeful expressions. James Wilson, a middle-aged black woman wearing professional attire and a kind smile, approached my seat. I'm Clark Johnson. Sorry for the wait. Her office was small but organized, with family photos sharing desk space with neat stacks of government forms. She gestured for me to sit across from her while she opened my file. Let's start with Form SSA-1, your application for retirement insurance benefits. She handed me several pages. And we'll need SSA-338 for the disability report, since you're applying before full retirement age. The paperwork felt overwhelming initially, but Clark's patient explanations made each section manageable. My 40-year employment history with Ford Motor Company impressed her. The documentation showed steady work, reliable income, and substantial contributions to the system. Mr. Wilson, your work record is impressive. Well-deserved retirement. Finally, I'll be free. The words slipped out before I could stop them, carrying more emotional weight than I'd intended. Clark's expression softened with understanding. Family pressures? I nodded, not trusting my voice to remain steady. She'd probably heard similar stories from other seniors, trapped between their own needs and their children's financial expectations. My phone buzzed insistently during the appointment. Michael's name appeared repeatedly on the screen, but I let each call go to voicemail. When we finished the paperwork, I finally answered. Dad, you're making a mistake. His voice carried the same desperate edge from last night's dinner confrontation. This is my life, Michael. I spoke quietly but firmly, aware that Clark was organizing my documents at her desk. Processing typically takes 6 to 8 weeks, she explained after I ended the call. Your first payment should arrive around mid-May, assuming everything processes smoothly. The bus ride home felt different, lighter somehow, despite Michael's continued opposition. I'd taken the first concrete step toward independence, and the official paperwork in my folder represented more than just retirement benefits. It symbolized reclaiming control over my own future. Michael was waiting when I walked through the front door, his expression a mixture of anger and wounded pride. But something in my demeanor must have warned him that further arguments would prove futile. Instead, he retreated to his home office, where I could hear him making phone calls about refinancing options and second mortgages. Over the following weeks, I established a new routine. Each morning, I checked the mailbox, hopefully. Each afternoon, I walked through the neighborhood, noting which houses displayed for rent signs. Each evening, I counted the small savings I'd accumulated in cash, hidden in my dresser drawer behind old photographs of Mary. The waiting period tested my resolve, but it also strengthened my determination. Michael's periodic attempts to change my mind only reinforced my conviction that independence was worth whatever sacrifices it required. May 15th arrived with the kind of pleasant spring morning that makes Detroit residents forget winter's harsh grip. I'd been checking the mail daily for 3 weeks, my anticipation building with each passing day. The routine had become almost ritualistic. Coffee first, then the short walk to our mailbox at the end of the driveway. Today felt different. The envelope bearing the Social Security Administration's return address sat nestled between utility bills and grocery store advertisements, like a prize waiting to be claimed. My hands trembled slightly as I carried it inside, closing myself in my bedroom before opening it carefully. The check was real. $1,847, made out to James Edward Wilson. More than I'd expected, actually. The calculations I'd done on napkins over the past months had been conservative estimates. I stared at the neat printing, the official seal, the signature that made it legally valid. This is my money, earned through honest labor, I whispered to the empty room. The walk to Chase Bank on Woodward Avenue took 20 minutes, during which I kept touching my shirt pocket to ensure the check remained safely tucked away. The morning was warm enough that I didn't need my heavy winter coat, and the lighter jacket felt symbolic of the burden lifting from my shoulders. Jennifer Lee had been my teller for nearly 15 years, watching me deposit paychecks and withdraw small amounts for household expenses. Her face brightened with genuine pleasure when she saw me approaching her window. "Mr. Wilson, how are you today?" "Better than I've been in months." I slid the check through the security glass. "I'd like to cash this, please." Her eyes widened as she read the amount and the Social Security designation. "Congratulations on your retirement, Mr. Wilson. You've certainly earned it." The process required additional verification for such a large cash withdrawal, but Jennifer handled everything efficiently. The counting machine's mechanical rhythm, as it sorted bills, created a satisfying soundtrack to my liberation. She arranged the money in neat stacks, hundreds, fifties, and twenties, that felt substantial and real in ways that electronic transfers never could. "Would you like an envelope for this?" "Please." I accepted the thick manila envelope, feeling its satisfying weight as I tucked it securely into my jacket's inside pocket. The walk home passed in a blur of contentment. I called Frank Thompson from a payphone outside the corner grocery store, needing to share this moment with someone who would understand its significance. "Frank, I'm finally free." "James, did you get it? The check actually came through." 1847. More than enough to start fresh. My voice carried a lightness I hadn't felt in years. Back home, I climbed the stairs to my bedroom and carefully locked the door. The money deserved proper respect, so I counted it twice before hiding it in my dresser's bottom drawer, beneath the box of Mary's letters I'd saved since her passing. The cash would remain there until I decided on my next move. Perhaps a small apartment across town, somewhere Michael's financial manipulations couldn't reach. That evening, I cooked myself a simple dinner and ate it in peaceful silence. Michael worked late at his office, avoiding another confrontation that might weaken his position. Sarah kept the twins occupied with homework and television, the house maintaining an artificial calm that suited my mood perfectly. Before bed, I allowed myself one more look at the hidden money. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight belonged to quiet satisfaction. I'd worked 40 years for this freedom, and no one could take it away from me now. Sleep came easily for the first time in months, my dreams filled with possibilities instead of anxieties. The weight of financial independence felt better than any pillow, and I woke the next morning ready to begin planning my escape from Michael's control. Sunlight streamed through my bedroom curtains, painting golden rectangles across the worn carpet as I stretched and smiled. Yesterday's triumph still warmed my chest. $1,847 in crisp bills, hidden safely away from Michael's grasping hands. Today would bring planning, maybe apartment hunting, definitely freedom. The morning felt different somehow, filled with possibilities that retirement had unlocked. Birds sang outside my window, their cheerful melodies matching my optimistic mood as I swung my legs over the bed's edge. Soon I'd wake up wherever I chose, answer to no one, spend my own money as I saw fit. My dresser drawer opened with its familiar squeak. The folded sweaters lay exactly where I'd left them, undisturbed and innocent-looking, but underneath, where thick bundles of bills should have waited, empty space stared back at me. A crumpled $10 bill and some loose change rattled in the drawer's corner. $17 total from yesterday's $1,847. My hands trembled as I lifted the sweaters, shook them frantically, searched every fold and crease for money that wasn't there. Impossible. The word escaped as a whisper while I slammed the drawer shut and yanked it open again, as if the money might magically reappear. Nothing. Just that pathetic $17 mocking my stupidity. Heart hammering against my ribs, I tore through the remaining drawers. Socks, underwear, old photographs of Mary scattered across the floor as I searched with growing desperation. Under the mattress, nothing. Behind the picture frames, empty. In the closet corners where dust bunnies collected, not a single bill. The bedroom window showed no signs of forced entry. The lock remained intact, the screen uncut. Whoever had done this possessed a key, knew the house layout, understood exactly where to look. But who could have known about my hiding place? I checked every possible location twice, my breathing becoming ragged as reality crystallized into cold certainty. Someone had systematically searched my room and stolen nearly $2,000 while I slept peacefully, dreaming of independence. My phone sat on the nightstand, and I reached for it instinctively. Police, report the theft. But my hand froze halfway to the device as fragments of possibility assembled into horrible understanding. No signs of break-in meant inside job. Only family members had access to the house overnight. Only someone who lived here could have searched so thoroughly, so quietly, without waking anyone. The thought hit like ice water in my veins, but I forced myself to consider it rationally. Michael knew about my retirement money. He'd made his demands clear during our dinner confrontation. When reasonable persuasion failed, had he resorted to outright theft? Downstairs I could hear familiar morning sounds, dishes clinking, coffee brewing, children's voices preparing for school. Normal family life continuing while my world crumbled upstairs. Time to find answers. Kitchen sounds drew me downstairs like a magnet pulls metal, the ordinary symphony of breakfast that had played every morning for the past 2 years. Sarah stood at the counter buttering toast, while Emma and Ethan hurried through cereal bowls, backpacks already positioned by their chairs for the school rush. Michael sat reading yesterday's Detroit Free Press, coffee steaming beside his plate of scrambled eggs. He looked up casually as I burst through the doorway, clutching the $17 in my trembling fist. "Morning, Dad. Sleep well?" His tone carried perfect normalcy, but something cold flickered behind his eyes that made my stomach clench with dread. "Michael, we've been robbed. My money is gone." Sarah's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. The children's spoons stopped moving as they sensed adult crisis brewing around their innocent breakfast. But Michael simply folded his newspaper with deliberate precision and set it beside his plate. "Nobody robbed us, Dad. I took your money." The words hit like physical blows, each syllable driving deeper into my chest. Emma started crying softly, while Ethan slid lower in his chair, trying to disappear. Sarah set down her cup with shaking hands, but said nothing. "Why? Why without my permission?" Michael stood slowly, his height advantage suddenly menacing in our small kitchen. When he smiled, it held no warmth, only cold calculation that reminded me of predators sizing up wounded prey. "You didn't listen to me. Remember our conversation at dinner? I told you what would happen if you retired." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick fold of bills. "My bills. This is rent for living in my house. I'll take all your pension payments and give you $20 per week for personal expenses." The injustice crashed over me like a wave. "This is my money. You're a thief." "Watch your tone." Michael's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper while he counted several bills and held them toward me like scraps thrown to a dog. $20. That's generous, considering you don't pay for food, utilities, or housing." "Your house? I paid for this house for 30 years. "Prove it in court, old man." Sarah finally spoke, her voice barely audible above the children sniffling. "Michael, maybe we should—" "Stay out of this, Sarah." He silenced her with a look that promised consequences for interference. Emma sobbed openly now, while Ethan stared at his untouched cereal, tears streaming down his face. They were watching their grandfather being destroyed by their father, learning lessons about power and cruelty that no 8-year-old should witness. Michael tucked the stolen money back into his pocket and returned to his breakfast as if nothing had happened. $20 a week, Dad. Take it or find somewhere else to live." The ultimatum hung in the kitchen air like smoke from a house fire, poisoning everything it touched. Rage built inside my chest like steam in an overheated engine, but I forced myself to remain standing while Michael resumed eating his eggs with theatrical calmness. The children needed to leave for school, needed escape from this toxic demonstration of adult cruelty. "Get out of my house if you don't like it." Michael waved his fork dismissively when I started to protest again. Sarah hurried the twins toward the hallway, their school bags clutched like shields against the warfare erupting around them. Emma looked back at me with frightened eyes that broke something fundamental in my heart. "I'm sorry you have to see this," I whispered to her retreating form. Michael finished his breakfast with deliberate slowness, checking his watch and gathering papers for work. His leather briefcase sat beside his chair, expensive and professional looking, a symbol of the success he'd built on my financial foundation. "Think about my offer, Dad. $20 a week is more than most nursing homes provide for spending money. He left for the office at exactly 9:30, kissing Sarah goodbye like any normal husband heading to another day of honest work. The front door slam echoed through the house, followed by his car starting and driving away toward downtown Detroit. I waited 10 minutes before moving. Michael's bedroom adjoined our main hallway, its door usually locked, but standing slightly ajar this morning. Perhaps he'd grown overconfident, certain that his aged father would accept defeat without fighting back. Perhaps he simply didn't expect me to possess enough backbone for retaliation. The briefcase sat on his dresser, unlatched and inviting. Inside, beneath insurance forms and business contracts, I found a manila envelope thick with familiar bills. My money, stolen while I slept trustingly in the room above. $1,630 remained after Michael's generous $20 allowance. I counted it twice, memorizing the exact amount for future reference, then slipped the bills into my shirt pocket. Let him discover the theft when he returned from work. Let him experience the same shock and violation I'd felt this morning. Upstairs, I packed quickly but thoroughly. One suitcase held my essential clothes, identification papers, and bank documents. Mary's photograph went into my jacket pocket, close to my heart where she'd always belonged. Everything else, furniture, books, lifetime accumulations of domestic comfort, would stay behind. Sarah appeared in my doorway as I snapped the suitcase closed. Her face showed genuine distress, possibly the first honest emotion she'd displayed in months. "James, please don't go. Maybe we can work something out with Michael." "Your husband is a thief, Sarah." "There's nothing to work out." She followed me downstairs, wringing her hands and offering compromises that missed the fundamental point entirely. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about dignity, respect, and the right to control my own life after 4 decades of honest labor. The front door opened onto Oak Street, where spring sunshine illuminated a neighborhood continuing its normal routine. Children played in yards while their mothers hung laundry and tended gardens. Life proceeded peacefully around my personal catastrophe, indifferent to the family destruction occurring behind our house's ordinary facade. I walked away without looking back, my suitcase rolling behind me across the cracked sidewalk. 3 blocks from Oak Street, I found the Detroit Inn, a weathered brick building that advertised weekly rates and accepted cash without questions. The desk clerk barely looked up from his newspaper as I slid $45 across the scarred counter and accepted a brass key attached to a plastic diamond. Room 127 smelled of old cigarettes and industrial disinfectant, but the lock worked and the bed looked clean enough. I set my suitcase on the narrow table and sat heavily on the mattress edge, suddenly feeling every one of my 65 years settling into my bones like winter cold. Mary's photograph smiled at me from my wallet, the picture I'd carried for 8 years since her funeral. She'd been beautiful even during the cancer treatments, maintaining her dignity when everything else was falling apart, just like I was trying to do now. "Mary, our son has become a monster." The words echoed in the small room, mixing with traffic sounds from 8 Mile Road outside. How had Michael transformed from the boy who'd cried in my arms after his mother's death into the man who'd stolen my retirement money without conscience? I remembered working double shifts at the Ford plant during his senior year of high school, coming home exhausted but determined to save enough for his college tuition. The guidance counselor said Michael showed promise in business management, could make something of himself with proper education. So I'd sold my Buick and took the bus to work for 2 years, every sacrifice worth it to give him opportunities I'd never had. The college graduation photo was tucked behind Mary's picture, Michael in his cap and gown, grinning beside his proud father who'd worked overtime through countless winters to make that moment possible. I'd bought him a car for graduation, a reliable Honda that would serve him well in his first job interviews. When Mary got sick, Michael had been supportive initially, but as her medical bills mounted and my savings dwindled, he'd grown distant, visiting less frequently and always seeming eager to leave. After her funeral, he'd suggested I sell the house and move into senior housing. For my own good, he'd claimed. Instead, I'd signed the deed over to his name for tax purposes, trusting him to care for the man who'd sacrificed everything for his success. The paperwork had felt like insurance against future problems, a way to keep the family home in the family. What a fool I'd been. Now I sat in a cheap motel room with $1,600 and nowhere to call home, while my son slept comfortably in the house I'd bought and paid for through 40 years of honest labor. The injustice burned in my chest like acid, transforming grief into something harder and more focused. I counted the remaining money twice, $1,630 after tonight's room payment, enough to survive for several weeks if I was careful, maybe longer if I found cheaper accommodations. But money wasn't the real issue anymore. Enough being a victim, time to show him real consequences. Morning light crept through the thin curtains as I made my decision. There were people who helped seniors, organizations that fought against exactly what Michael had done to me. Tomorrow I'd start looking for allies in this war my son had declared. The Detroit Public Library's computer terminal yielded exactly what I needed. The Senior Support Center on Gratiot Avenue offered free legal consultations for elderly residents facing financial abuse. Their website featured testimonials from people whose children had stolen their money, manipulated their assets, or pressured them into unfavorable arrangements. Reading those stories felt like looking into a mirror. I wasn't alone in this particular form of family betrayal. 2 days of research and preparation led me to their modest brick building on a bright Tuesday morning. The manila folder under my arm contained every document I'd managed to gather. The original house deed, mortgage papers, and bank statements showing my pension deposits. My hands shook slightly as I approached the reception desk. "James Wilson to see Elizabeth Harris. I have a 10 o'clock appointment." The receptionist, a kindly woman in her 50s, smiled warmly and gestured toward a row of comfortable chairs. "She'll be right with you, Mr. Wilson. Can I get you some coffee?" Elizabeth Harris emerged from a side office 5 minutes later, a professional woman in her mid-40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense handshake. Her office walls displayed law degrees from Wayne State University, alongside certificates in elder advocacy. "Tell me what's been happening, Mr. Wilson." I explained the situation carefully, starting with my retirement decision and ending with Monday's confrontation in the kitchen. Elizabeth listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she reached for my folder. "May I examine your documents?" The house deed seemed to capture her immediate attention. She studied it carefully, then turned to her computer and began typing. Her eyebrows rose as she read whatever appeared on her screen. "Mr. Wilson, the house is registered in your name. You're the sole owner. But Michael has lived there over 10 years, ever since his mother died. That gives him no ownership rights. What he did is financial exploitation of an elderly person, which is a crime in Michigan." Elizabeth leaned forward, her expression growing more serious. "Under MCL 750.174A, anyone who takes advantage of a vulnerable adult's assets can face both criminal charges and civil liability." The legal terminology washed over me like cold water, shocking but somehow cleansing. "You mean I have rights?" "Absolutely. We can demand eviction, compensation for damages, and even retroactive rent." She began pulling forms from her desk drawer. "Your son essentially stole your money and is illegally occupying your property. Michigan law takes elder financial abuse very seriously." For the first time in days, hope flickered in my chest. "What do we do first?" "I'll draft a formal demand letter requiring him to vacate the premises within 30 days and compensate you for the theft. We'll send it certified mail to create a legal record." Elizabeth's pen moved across the letterhead as she spoke. "If he refuses, we can file for both criminal charges and civil recovery." The next hour passed in a blur of explanations and document preparation. Elizabeth outlined the entire process: demand letter, waiting period, potential court action if Michael refused compliance. The system I'd trusted for 40 years of honest work was finally protecting me instead of abandoning me. "This will take time, Mr. Wilson. Legal processes move slowly, and your son might hire his own attorney." Elizabeth sealed the completed demand letter in an official envelope. "Are you prepared for a potentially lengthy battle?" I thought of Mary's photograph in my wallet, of the college tuition I'd sacrificed my car to pay, of Monday morning's casual cruelty over breakfast dishes. I've been preparing for this fight my whole life. I just didn't know it. Tomorrow we'd mail the letter that would change everything. The main post office on Fort Street processed certified mail with bureaucratic precision that suited my mood perfectly. Elizabeth stood beside me as the postal clerk attached tracking numbers and return receipt requests to the thick envelope bearing Michael's name and my former address. Make sure he signs for it personally, I instructed, sliding the postal fees across the counter. I want proof he received every word. 4 days had passed since our legal consultation, during which I'd found a small studio apartment in Corktown and begun establishing my independent life. The place cost $600 a month, manageable on my pension, and offered something the Oak Street house never had: complete control over my own space. Elizabeth had crafted the demand letter with surgical precision, each paragraph building toward ultimatums that would force Michael to confront the consequences of his actions. Reading it one final time before mailing felt like holding a loaded weapon. This should reach him by Friday afternoon, the postal worker confirmed, handing me the tracking receipt. Friday came and went without response. Saturday morning brought the return receipt in my mailbox, Michael's hasty signature confirming delivery at 2:47 p.m. on May 25th, 2025. I imagined his expression while reading those devastating paragraphs, the slow realization that his father had found both allies and ammunition. My phone rang at exactly 11 o'clock Saturday morning. "Dad, are you crazy? This is our house." Michael's voice carried the same dismissive tone he'd used during our kitchen confrontation, but underneath I detected something new, uncertainty bordering on panic. "No, Michael, this is my house. You have 30 days. You can't do this. I've invested years improving the property, maintaining it, paying utilities, with my money." I kept my voice level, enjoying the power shift more than I'd expected. Every mortgage payment, every repair, every utility bill came from income I earned or savings I accumulated. You've been living rent-free in my house while stealing my retirement funds. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. When he spoke again, the bluster had evaporated. "Dad, let's talk about this reasonably. Maybe we can work out some arrangement." The arrangement is clearly outlined in the letter. 30 days to vacate. $5,000 compensation for theft and emotional distress. Keys returned to my attorney. I paused, letting each demand sink in. "Those terms aren't negotiable." $5,000? I don't have that kind of money." "Then you shouldn't have stolen mine." "This is ridiculous. I'm calling my own lawyer." "Good. Mine will enjoy explaining Michigan elder abuse statutes to yours." The conversation ended with Michael's angry disconnection, but I felt nothing except cold satisfaction. For the first time in months, someone else was scrambling to respond to my actions instead of the reverse. My studio apartment's single window faced west toward downtown Detroit, where afternoon sunlight painted the Renaissance Center's glass towers gold. Somewhere in this city, Michael was probably staring at that same letter, finally understanding that his elderly father possessed both backbone and legal representation. 30 days would pass quickly. Then we'd discover whether my son valued his stolen comfort more than avoiding criminal prosecution. Elizabeth's office buzzed with focused energy as she spread documents across her conference table like a general planning battlefield strategy. Bank statements, property deeds, and witness contact information created an impressive array of evidence that would demolish Michael's position in court. "We need to establish a clear pattern of financial abuse spanning multiple years," she explained, highlighting key transactions with her yellow marker. "Your pension deposits, his unauthorized withdrawals, utility payments you made while he claimed ownership. It all builds our case." The next 2 weeks transformed into methodical evidence, gathering that felt more satisfying than any work I'd done since retiring. Mrs. Dorothy Johnson, my neighbor for 15 years, welcomed me into her kitchen with coffee and righteous indignation about Michael's behavior. "That boy always yelled at you, Mr. Wilson. We heard it through the walls, especially after his mother passed." Her weathered hands gestured emphatically while she spoke. "Never saw him do yard work or house maintenance. Always you out there in all weather, fixing things while he sat inside watching television." Frank Martinez across the street confirmed similar observations during our front porch conversation. "Michael treated you like hired help in your own home, made my wife and me sick to watch, but we figured it was family business until now. Each witness statement strengthened our foundation, but the financial documentation provided the most damaging evidence. Bank records revealed a systematic pattern of Michael accessing my pension deposits without permission, treating my retirement income as his personal allowance, while contributing nothing to household expenses. We'll demand not only compensation but retroactive rent for 3 years, Elizabeth announced during our strategy session. Market rate for that house is $2,000 monthly. He owes you $72,000 in back rent alone. Michael's phone calls became increasingly desperate as our court date approached. His attorney had apparently explained the weakness of claiming family arrangement without written agreements or proof of contribution to household expenses. "Dad, let's forget this nonsense and talk reasonably," he pleaded during his latest call. "Come home and we'll work something out. You started this war, son. Now face the consequences." "This is crazy. I improved that property, maintained it for years, with my money, using my tools, while living rent-free in my house." My voice carried the cold certainty that comes from overwhelming evidence. "Your lawyer should have explained how weak your position is." The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up again. When he spoke, desperation had replaced his usual arrogance. "Please, Dad, Sarah's pregnant again. We can't afford to move right now." That revelation hit like unexpected ice water, but I forced myself to remain focused on justice rather than sentiment. Michael had made his choices when he stole my retirement money. Sarah's pregnancy, while unfortunate timing, didn't excuse financial elder abuse. You should have considered your family's needs before committing theft and fraud. Elizabeth filed our eviction papers the following Monday, requesting expedited hearing due to elder abuse circumstances. The court clerk stamped our documents with satisfying efficiency, scheduling oral arguments for June 15th, exactly 3 weeks away. Time enough for Michael to understand that legal consequences were inevitable, and for me to savor the approaching moment when justice would finally prevail. Judge Robert Clark's courtroom commanded respect, with its polished wood paneling and stern portraits of previous jurists who dispensed justice from the same bench. I straightened my tie, the same navy blue one I'd worn to Mary's funeral, and took my seat beside Elizabeth at the plaintiff's table. Michael sat across the aisle with his attorney, Thomas Chen, a young lawyer who kept shuffling papers nervously and whispering urgent consultations with his clearly unprepared client. My son looked haggard, his usually pristine appearance betraying sleepless nights and mounting stress. "Case number 2025, CV 8847, Wilson v. Wilson," the bailiff announced. "Eviction proceedings with claims of elder financial abuse." Judge Clark reviewed our filed documents with practiced efficiency before addressing both legal teams. "This case involves serious allegations of financial exploitation against an elderly parent. I expect clear evidence and professional conduct from all parties." Elizabeth rose with calm confidence, her opening statement painting a devastating picture of systematic abuse spanning 3 years. She presented bank records showing my pension deposits flowing directly into accounts Michael controlled, utility bills I'd paid while he claimed property ownership, and maintenance receipts proving I'd funded all household expenses. "The defendant has essentially stolen his father's retirement income while forcing him to live as an unpaid tenant in his own home," Elizabeth declared, her voice carrying the moral outrage I felt but couldn't express myself. Mrs. Johnson testified with passionate clarity about years of witnessed abuse. "Michael screamed at his father constantly, treated him like a servant rather than the man who'd sacrificed everything for his education and success." The bank manager confirmed unauthorized access patterns, while our property appraiser established fair market rental value at $2,000 monthly. Each piece of evidence built toward inevitable conclusion. Michael had no legal right to occupy my house and owed substantial compensation for his theft. Thomas Chen's defense crumbled under cross-examination. His claims about implied family agreements met skeptical questioning from Judge Clark, who demanded written documentation that didn't exist. "Your Honor, my client has lived in that house for over 10 years, Chen argued desperately. "Surely that establishes some form of tenancy rights." "Squatters' rights don't apply to family relationships, Counselor," Judge Clark replied dryly. Without rental agreements or proof of compensation, your client has been living as a guest who stole from his host. When called to testify, I spoke quietly but firmly about 4 decades of honest work, the sacrifices I'd made for Michael's education, and the betrayal of having my retirement money stolen by the son I'd raised and supported. Michael's own testimony proved disastrous. Under Elizabeth's questioning, he admitted taking my money without permission, couldn't provide receipts for claimed household contributions, and eventually broke down in tears when forced to acknowledge his ingratitude. Judge Clark's verdict carried the finality of absolute justice. The evidence unequivocally proves Mr. James Wilson's property ownership. Defendant's actions qualify as financial exploitation of an elderly person under Michigan statute, MCL 750-174A. Eviction within 60 days. Compensation of $10,000 for emotional distress. Retroactive rent of $72,000 for 3 years of unauthorized occupancy. Michael's anguished cry echoed through the courtroom as the gavel fell, but I felt only quiet satisfaction. After months of humiliation and betrayal, the legal system had vindicated my dignity and restored my rights. Justice, it seemed, was worth the wait. August sunlight streamed through my kitchen window. My kitchen in my house, restored to its rightful owner after months of legal battle. The morning coffee tasted sweeter somehow, brewed in familiar surroundings that finally belonged to me again without question or compromise. 2 months had passed since Judge Clark's verdict, and Michael's court-ordered payments arrived punctually on the 1st of each month. Chase Bank's automated notification system chimed pleasantly whenever his electronic transfer appeared in my account, $2,000 that represented both justice served and lessons learned. The house bore fresh improvements that reflected my tastes, rather than accommodating someone else's preferences. Mary's photographs occupied places of honor throughout rooms painted in colors we'd chosen together decades ago. The garden bloomed with flowers she'd loved, tended by hands that finally had time to nurture growing things instead of working double shifts. Mr. Wilson, another transfer received from Michael Wilson, Jennifer Lee informed me during my weekly bank visit, right on schedule, as usual. Justice has finally been served, I replied, endorsing the deposit slip with satisfaction that never seemed to diminish. My retirement had transformed from nightmare into adventure. Florida beckoned with winter warmth and old friends from the Ford plant who'd retired years earlier. The Senior Support Center welcomed my volunteer hours, helping other elderly victims navigate legal systems designed to protect their rights and dignity. Photography classes at Detroit Community College filled Tuesday evenings with creative pursuits I'd postponed for 40 years. My instructor, a patient woman named Carol, praised my eye for composition while helping me develop techniques for capturing Detroit's urban renewal alongside its persistent character. The social calendar at the Senior Center introduced possibilities I hadn't considered. Bridge tournaments, book clubs, and carefully orchestrated dinner gatherings where conversation flowed easier than I'd expected. Margaret O'Brien, a widow from the photography class, shared my appreciation for quiet museums and afternoon concerts at the Detroit Symphony. Michael called on Labor Day weekend, his voice carrying humility that replaced his former arrogance. "Dad, please forgive me. I understand now what I put you through. You taught me to be strong, Michael. Now pay for the lesson. The payments aren't the problem anymore. It's knowing I destroyed our relationship for money I didn't even need that badly." His transformation seemed genuine, but trust would require years to rebuild. Sarah had found work as a medical receptionist. Their new apartment in Highland Park was modest, but adequate, and the children were learning valuable lessons about earning rather than taking what they needed. "Perhaps we can have coffee sometime," I offered carefully, on neutral ground with no expectations except conversation. "I'd like that, Dad. I'd like that very much." Evening light painted my renovated kitchen gold as I prepared dinner for one, a meal chosen for taste rather than budget, cooked in my own time without pressure or interference. The telephone rang occasionally with social invitations, travel opportunities, or simply friends checking on my well-being. Tomorrow would bring another photography expedition with Carol, then lunch at the senior center where my advice helped other families navigate similar battles. Next month promised Florida sunshine and reunions with colleagues who'd retired before family obligations trapped me in patterns of sacrifice and enabling. Mary's photograph smiled from the windowsill, surrounded by flowers that bloomed because I finally had time to tend them properly. Somewhere across town, Michael was learning to live within his means while honoring debts to the father he'd betrayed. The balance felt exactly right. I raised my coffee cup in a silent toast to second chances, hard-won justice, and the sweet satisfaction of reclaiming a life I'd thought was lost forever. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.